All right, so get ready because we're going to dive deep into a case.
Yeah.
It's pretty chilling, and it shows how investigators can put together tiny clues to solve a case.
Yeah.
We're looking at the story of Sierra Joggins
Mm.
and the man who was convicted of her murder, James, or Jim Worley.
Right.
We've got excerpts from a true crime documentary to help guide us here. I'm really interested to hear from you about the methods they used to get to the bottom of this. There seem to be a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah, absolutely. What stands out in this case is how seemingly insignificant details and some very clever tactics by investigators ultimately unraveled Worley's fabricated story.
Yeah.
There's so much we can learn from this.
Okay, well, I'm all ears. Let's start with the basics.
Sure.
Sierra Joggins, a 20-year-old from Delta, Ohio, disappeared on July 19, 2016 while biking home. Her boyfriend, Josh Kolosinski, was the last person to see her. I can't imagine the worry and fear
Right.
that must have set in for her loved ones when she didn't make it home.
It's a parent's worst nightmare. Initially, there were no obvious signs of foul play, just a young woman vanishing really into thin air
Yeah,
until her bike was found, abandoned in a cornfield.
right,
And here's the thing. It wasn't just the bike.
right.
There were earbuds, sunglasses, and a motorcycle helmet found alongside it. What did investigators make of that, especially the helmet?
Yeah, that helmet was an early clue that something wasn't right. Remember, Josh told investigators Sierra had been wearing earbuds, and those were found at the scene. So the helmet didn't belong to her.
Right.
It suggested someone else was there.
Okay, so that's what Jim Worley enters the picture. He lived close to where Sierra's bike was found and told investigators he'd been riding his motorcycle that day. What was it about him that made investigators raise an eyebrow?
Well, in his initial interview, Worley mentioned his motorcycle kept stalling, which meant he had to push it. This placed him right near where Sierra's bike was discovered. But then he added a detail. He claimed to have seen two bikes in the cornfield. Of course, they only found Sierra's. Wait, he said he saw two bikes.
Yes.
Why would he say that if there was only one?
Exactly. That discrepancy, along with a few other things he said, piqued the investigators' interest. Worley also mentioned losing items that day: a helmet, fuses, a screwdriver, and glasses. Sound familiar?
Those are the exact items found with Sierra's bike.
Yes.
It seems a little too coincidental, don't you think? Did investigators pick up on that right away?
Oh, absolutely. But beyond the facts he presented, Worley's behavior during the interview was also a red flag.
Okay.
He became increasingly agitated, almost as if he was trying a little too hard to appear cooperative.
Like he was trying to overcompensate for something? I've heard that can be a sign of deception.
Precisely. And it's not uncommon. People who are trying to hide something often overcompensate, almost as if they're trying to convince themselves as much as the investigators.
Wow. So even at this early stage, investigators were picking up on these subtle cues that suggested Worley might be involved. What happened next? Did they confront him about these inconsistencies?
Not just yet. They decided to wait for the lab results from the helmet. When those came back, they showed the DNA didn't belong to Sierra. It belonged to a female, but not her. That was a significant development.
Definitely a red flag. What did they do with this new information?
Armed with the search warrant, investigators headed back to Worley's property. And what they found in his barn was, well, let's just say it raised a lot more questions.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What did they find?
Bags. Multiple bags filled with women's lingerie tucked away in a corner of the barn.
Hold on. Bags of lingerie?
Yep.
What was that all about?
That's what investigators wanted to know. Worley's explanation was, let's just say, bizarre and inconsistent. He claimed he gives them out when he goes out with people, but that obviously didn't add up.
Giving out used lingerie.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. It sounds like he was scrambling for an excuse.
It certainly seemed that way. This discovery, along with his previous evasive behavior, painted a very unsettling picture. And as they continued to search the barn, investigators found something else. Something that sent chills down their spines.
Oh, this is getting creepy. What do they find?
A hidden freezer, buried in the back of Worley's barn.
A hidden freezer.
Yeah.
Now, that's just straight out of a true crime novel.
Right.
What did Worley have to say about that?
He tried to downplay it, claiming it was for storing his stash of marijuana.
But I'm guessing investigators weren't buying that story.
You're right, they weren't, especially when a cadaver dog reacted to the freezer, indicating that a body might have been stored there at some point.
Okay, so now we've got bags of women's lingerie, a hidden freezer, a cadaver dog, and a suspect who's acting increasingly suspicious. Things are definitely starting to point towards something sinister. What did investigators do next?
This is where their strategy takes a fascinating turn.
Okay.
They decided to shift tactics, trying to get Worley to slip up. Rather than confronting him directly, they started downplaying the potential crime, suggesting that whatever happened might have been an accident.
Interesting. So instead of accusing him, they were almost giving him a way out. Why would they do that?
It's a clever psychological tactic.
Yeah.
By minimizing the severity of the crime, they hoped Worley might let his guard down and reveal something incriminating. And you know what? It worked.
He took the bait.
He did. He made a telling comment about an accident, implying he knew more than he was letting on.
Wow. Talk about a slip of the tongue. So even though he was trying to maintain his innocence, he inadvertently revealed that he knew something had happened. Did investigators call him out on that?
They didn't need to. They had another ace up their sleeve. Remember those surveillance cameras in the area?
Right.
Well, the footage contradicted Worley's alibi.
Wait, so his alibi about just being out on his motorcycle that day wasn't true. What did the footage show?
It showed Worley's truck, not just his motorcycle, near the abduction site that day. His story was crumbling.
So the lies are starting to pile up.
Yeah.
But did they have anything concrete to tie him to Sierra?
They did. And it was a piece of evidence that sealed Worley's fate. A bloody handprint was found on his motorcycle.
Oh man, that's not good.
No, it wasn't good for Worley. The DNA from that handprint matched Sierra's. That was the undeniable link they needed.
So at this point, with the mounting evidence and the holes in his story, Worley was arrested for Sierra's abduction, right?
Yes. But there was still a crucial question that needed answering. Where was Sierra?
That's a good point. They had Worley in custody, but they still didn't know what had happened to Sierra. What happened next?
The search for Sierra continued, and tragically, it led to a heartbreaking discovery. Her body was found buried in a field just a few miles from Worley's property. She had been bound, gagged, and was wearing clothing that matched some of the items found in his barn. The cause of death was asphyxiation.
Oh, that's just awful. It's hard to even fathom the pain Sierra's loved ones must have gone through. It's cases like this that make me wonder if there are ways we, as a society, can do more to protect potential victims before it's too late.
It's a question that haunts us all, especially when we see a pattern of behavior like Worley's. As investigators dug deeper into his past, they uncovered some truly disturbing similarities to Sierra's case.
This wasn't his first time hurting someone.
No, it wasn't. In 1990, Worley was convicted of abducting a woman named Robin Gardner. The parallels to Sierra's case are chilling. Robin was riding her bike, just like Sierra, when she was hit by a truck and knocked into a ditch. At first, she thought it was an accident.
A hit and run. That's scary enough on its own.
Absolutely. But it gets worse. The truck driver, James Worley, got out of his vehicle, but instead of helping her, he held a screwdriver to her throat. He forced Robin into his truck, threatening to kill her if she resisted.
It's like something out of a nightmare. How did she escape?
Thankfully, Robin was incredibly brave and resourceful. He handcuffed her and was driving when she managed to break free. She jumped out of the truck and ran for help. She was able to flag down a passing motorcyclist who took her to safety.
Thank goodness for that motorcyclist. But what happened to Worley after that? Surely he was punished severely for that attack.
Well, he was arrested and charged. But even then, he tried to deny everything, claiming Robin had made the whole story up. Sadly, it's a tactic often used by abusers, blame the victim.
It's infuriating. But thankfully, in Robin's case, the court saw through his lies.
They did. He was found guilty and sentenced to prison. But here's the part that's really hard to swallow. He only served 2 years of a 3 to 10-year sentence.
2 years. For kidnapping and threatening to kill someone? That seems unbelievably lenient.
It does, doesn't it? And it makes you wonder if a longer sentence back then might have prevented Sierra's tragic fate. This is where the conversation about Sierra's Law, the petition started by Sierra's family to create a violent offender registry in Ohio, becomes so crucial. If such a registry had existed back then, perhaps Worley would have been monitored more closely after his release, and maybe Sierra would still be alive today. It's heartbreaking to think about.
It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the justice system doesn't do enough to protect the innocent from repeat offenders. But even beyond Robin's case, there's a suggestion that Worley might be linked to another disappearance.
You're right. In 1996, a woman named Claudia Tinsley, who worked as an adult entertainer, vanished without a trace. Worley was never officially charged in connection with her disappearance, but there are a lot of similarities to both Robin and Sierra's cases.
So we're potentially talking about a man who may have been preying on women for decades.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how many other victims might be out there.
It's a terrifying thought. But it also underscores the importance of Sierra's Law. A registry like that could help law enforcement connect the dots between cases and potentially stop someone like Worley before they can hurt anyone else.
Absolutely. So Worley was ultimately convicted of Sierra's murder, but did he accept responsibility for his actions?
Not at all. Even after his arrest, he attempted to maintain his innocence. He even went so far as to write a 105-page manifesto from prison, claiming he was being framed by the police.
Wow, a manifesto. What was his angle there?
It seems like a desperate attempt to control the narrative, to paint himself as a victim of a conspiracy. But the evidence against him was just too strong. The DNA, the witness statements, the physical evidence found on his property.
Right, it all pointed to his guilt. What happened at his trial?
His trial began in March 2018. And honestly, it wasn't much of a contest. The prosecution laid out a meticulous case, and Worley's defense simply couldn't refute the overwhelming evidence.
So it sounds like it was a pretty open and shut case. What was the verdict?
The jury found him guilty on multiple charges, including aggravated murder and kidnapping. They didn't hesitate to deliver the harshest possible sentence, death.
Wow. So where does that leave him now?
He's currently on death row, awaiting his execution, which is scheduled for May 20, 2025. But while Worley sits in prison, Sierra's family has been tirelessly fighting for justice and working to prevent future tragedies.
You're talking about Sierra's Law, right?
Yeah.
Did their efforts to establish a violent offender registry in Ohio succeed?
They did. They gathered over 13,000 signatures for their petition, and in December of 2018, the bill was signed into law. It's a testament to their strength and their commitment to turning their unimaginable grief into something positive.
That's amazing. It's a powerful example of how, even in the face of such a horrific loss, people can make a real difference. It also speaks to the need for systemic change.
Absolutely. Sierra's Law is a legacy that will hopefully save lives, but it also highlights the systemic failures that allowed someone like Worley to operate under the radar for so long. It raises important questions about how our justice system handles violent offenders and how we can better protect potential victims.
I think those are questions that everyone listening should be asking themselves. What can we do individually and collectively to make a difference? But before we get too deep into that, I'm curious to know what happened to Worley's property.
That's another interesting development. Sierra's family was awarded Worley's property in a wrongful death suit. And in a powerful act of reclaiming the space and honoring Sierra's memory, they decided to demolish the farmhouse where he lived.
Wow, that's quite a statement. To tear down the physical structure where so much darkness resided.
It was a way of saying, you may have taken our daughter, but you will not take our hope. You will not define this space.
It's a message of resilience, of defiance, of love triumphing over evil.
Yeah, it really is. You know, it's a testament to her mother, Sheila Vakalik, to take such grief and turn it into action, to push for Sierra's Law, to reclaim that property.
Right.
It's really inspiring.
It is, and it makes me think about the importance of supporting victims' families.
Yeah.
Not just, right after the crime, but long-term, as they try to heal, as they seek justice.
Yeah.
It's a long and difficult road.
Absolutely. Their voices and experiences need to be heard, not just for their own healing, but to inform how we as a society can better address these issues and hopefully prevent similar tragedies. Yeah. But looking back on this whole case, what struck me was the tenacity of the investigators. They didn't let up. They followed every lead, no matter how small.
And they used, traditional methods and then some really clever psychological tactics to get to the truth.
They really did. That moment when they downplayed the crime, suggesting it might have been an accident.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
It completely threw Worley off balance. And it led to that slip-up when he mentioned an accident.
Right. He practically incriminated himself.
Yeah.
Without even realizing it. It shows how understanding the psychology of someone like that, someone trying to hide a horrific crime, can be just as important as gathering physical evidence.
Precisely. And you can tell the investigators in this case had a deep understanding of human behavior. They knew how to apply just the right amount of pressure to get Worley to crack.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate the dedication and skill that goes into this line of work. They clearly poured countless hours into this. I can only imagine the emotional toll it must have taken on them too. But they were determined to get justice for Sierra, and they didn't stop until they did.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the role of forensic science. In this case, the DNA evidence, the blood analysis, the trace evidence, these were all crucial pieces of the puzzle that helped build that airtight case.
Yeah, it's a good reminder of how far forensic science has come.
Yeah.
and how vital a role it plays in so many investigations, especially when the victim can no longer speak for themselves.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this case,
Yes.
what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What do you think?
Well, for me, this case reinforces the need to be vigilant and aware of our surroundings.
Yeah,
We need to look out for one another, report anything suspicious, and never hesitate to trust our instincts if something feels off.
absolutely. And I think on a larger scale, this case is a call to action. We need to support legislation like Sierra's law, advocate for stronger laws to protect vulnerable people, hold our justice system accountable for ensuring that violent offenders are properly monitored, rehabilitated.
Absolutely.
And as we move forward, it's important to remember Sierra Colvin, not just as a victim, but as a young woman with dreams,
Yeah.
a life that was tragically cut short. Her story is a reminder that these crimes have a devastating ripple effect
Right.
that impacts families, communities, and society as a whole.
Her legacy lives on in the hearts of those who loved her and in the positive changes that have been made in her name.
Yeah.
We can honor her memory by working together to create a world where these kinds of tragedies are no longer commonplace, a world where everyone can live safely and freely.
Well said. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has been informative and thought-provoking. Knowledge is power, and understanding these crimes is the first step in preventing them. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay safe.